It was just another ordinary morning inside the grand, bustling city courthouse, a place where cases moved like clockwork and justice was supposedly delivered without prejudice. The courtroom was alive with the quiet murmur of anticipation, packed with spectators, legal professionals, and defendants, all waiting their turn before the infamous Judge Harold Whitman. He was a man whose reputation preceded him, known for his razor-sharp tongue and outright dismissive attitude toward those he considered undeserving of his respect. If he didn't see value in you, he made sure you knew it. That particular morning, at the defendant's table, stood a black woman named Alicia Monroe. She was dressed in a neatly pressed black blazer and matching slacks, an ensemble that spoke of quiet confidence. Her posture was flawless, her expression calm and composed, but there was something more, an undeniable air of authority surrounding her. Yet, despite her poised presence, Judge Whitman barely gave her a second glance as he casually flipped through the case file in front of him. Then, with an audible scoff, he adjusted his glasses and spoke. "Miss Monroe," he drawled, voice laced with condescension. "It says here you were pulled over for a minor traffic violation. But when the officer requested your identification, you refused. Is that correct?" Alicia remained composed, her tone even. "Your Honor, I did not refuse. I simply informed the officer that my ID was inside my purse, and I would retrieve it carefully." Judge Whitman waved a dismissive hand before she could say another word. "I don't need your version of events, Miss Monroe." His voice was thick with impatience. "The fact remains, when law enforcement asks for identification, you comply. Immediately. There's no room for, how should I put this, attitude." A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom, quiet but pointed. Alicia's jaw tightened just slightly, yet she remained the picture of professionalism, refusing to be rattled. Across the room, the prosecutor smirked. "Your Honor," he interjected smoothly, "the officer reported that Ms. Monroe was uncooperative. She delayed providing her credentials, which naturally raised suspicion. That is why she was detained for further questioning." Judge Whitman leaned back in his chair, shaking his head with exaggerated disappointment. "See? This is exactly the problem we're dealing with these days. People thinking they're above the law." He then turned his piercing gaze back to Alicia, his smirk widening. "Let me guess, you thought you could challenge authority and just walk away?" The murmurs in the courtroom grew louder. Alicia took a slow breath, steadying herself. She had faced far more intense situations than this, ones that held far greater danger than a courtroom full of judgmental stares. Her voice remained unwavering as she spoke. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "I complied with the officer's request as soon as I had the opportunity. I also identified myself properly, yet my credentials were ignored." Judge Whitman let out a chuckle, shaking his head as though amused by her audacity. "And what credentials would those be, Miss Monroe? Are you some kind of YouTube lawyer? A self-proclaimed social justice warrior?" The courtroom erupted into laughter. Even the prosecutor couldn't hide his amusement, grinning as Alicia was ridiculed before the packed gallery. But Alicia, she remained unfazed. With a steady hand, she reached into the inner pocket of her blazer, retrieving a sleek, leather wallet. With a swift, practiced motion, she flipped it open and held it up for all to see. The laughter died instantly. Silence fell over the courtroom like a crashing wave. The bold, golden letters gleamed under the fluorescent lighting. United States Secret Service. Judge Whitman's smirk vanished. His face paled as his eyes darted back and forth between Alicia's badge and her unwavering, authoritative gaze. The prosecutor's jaw slackened, his earlier confidence evaporating in an instant. A hush spread across the room. Some spectators gasped, others whispered frantically, struggling to process what had just unfolded before them. Alicia took a single step forward, her voice sharp yet controlled. "Your Honor, I am Special Agent Alicia Monroe, assigned to the United States Secret Service." The weight of her words pressed down on the courtroom. "I was returning from an official operation when I was pulled over. I followed protocol, identified myself, and yet I was still treated as a threat." Her gaze darkened, the weight of truth behind her next words undeniable. because of assumptions, because of bias. Judge Whitman swallowed hard, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. The arrogance he had displayed moments ago crumbled before the eyes of everyone in attendance. His hands fidgeted slightly before he cleared his throat, suddenly hyper-aware of the fact that he had just publicly humiliated a high-ranking federal agent in a room full of witnesses. Miss Monroe, Agent Monroe, she corrected him smoothly, her voice unwavering. The judge visibly flinched, quickly correcting himself. Agent Monroe, I sincerely apologize for any, misunderstanding. His words, though meant to sound apologetic, came out awkward and forced. Alicia held his gaze for a long, tense moment before shifting her focus to the prosecutor. And as for your claims that I was being uncooperative, she let the moment hang, her presence commanding the entire room. I'd like to remind you that deliberately impeding a federal agent in the course of their duties is a federal offense. The prosecutor, who had been enjoying the judge's mockery earlier, now sat frozen in place, his face drained of color. Any trace of smugness had been wiped clean. Judge Whitman let out a shaky breath, rubbing his temple as a bead of sweat formed at his brow. Agent Monroe, in light of this new information, he fumbled, his voice suddenly lacking the bravado from before, I see no reason for this case to proceed any further. Consider all charges dismissed. Alicia gave a slight, respectful nod, then calmly closed her badge wallet and turned to leave. As she walked toward the exit, the silence in the room remained thick, though now filled with hushed whispers, whispers of shock, of admiration. Officers who had been present subtly straightened their stances, some even standing at attention, a silent gesture of respect toward the woman who had just turned an entire courtroom on its head. And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind an unforgettable moment, one that no one in that room would ever forget.